Well, it's official. Canon has discontinued the EOS M system in what is a sad day for video and photography. Hello everyone, my name's Josh from Videos by Josh, and today we're going to be talking about Canon discontinuing the EOS M system. For those not familiar with the Canon EOS M line, this is Canon's oldest mirrorless line of cameras. It actually precedes Sony's entry into the market in 2013 with the Alpha system. Canon released the EOS M system in 2012. The EOS M line was originally pitched as a mobility-focused option rather than their traditional DSLR systems, and then throughout the years this shifted into a more budget offering for new photographers. For those not familiar, EOS in Canon camera stands for Electro-Optical system, and M in this line of cameras standing for mobility. Canon officially launched the EOS M system in 2012 with a lot of notable cameras throughout the year, such as the EOS M, the EOS M Mark II, the EOS M10, the EOS M100, and finally the EOS M200, along with many other cameras. And this discontinuation does hit a soft spot for me because I personally liked the EOS M5 Mark I and II and the EOS M6 Mark II, which in itself was a very versatile camera, able to shoot at 20 frames per second in photos and record 10-bit 4K video. Canon also offered some of their EOS M cameras like the M50 Mark II in a solid white body, and I think that's just wild. But unfortunately, the writing looks to have been on the wall for the Canon EOS M system for quite some time, despite Canon saying earlier this year that they would not be killing off their EOS M system. It was kind of obvious once we started to get APS-C cameras in the RF mount, but we're going to talk about that a bit later. The EOS M line of cameras was always creative focused. They had responsive touchscreens, flippy screens for some of them, and their small size and relatively cheap accessories made these great cameras for content creators and creatives. And for most people who I know who used an EOS M line of camera, that served as their first real camera getting into the creative space. Now, all the cameras in the EOS M system were APS-C sensor cameras. They were a good mid-range between micro four thirds and full frame. The EOS M cameras also came with their own lineup of unique lenses, which have now been discontinued. These lenses were called EOS M, and they were released into a robust ecosystem of pre-existing EF lenses, and it was kind of a mixture there where you could use EF lenses on EOS M cameras, but not the other way around. You can't use mirrorless lenses like the EOS M on older EF cameras, and that's because of the flange distance difference between standard DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. I think my favorite picture that I ever saw, not with but of an EOS M camera, was when someone adapted the massive Canon 400mm 2.8 onto the original EOS M. That was was awesome. Continuing to talk about the lenses, there really weren't a lot for this system. Like, Canon didn't produce EOS M lenses like they did EF lenses and later RF lenses. These lenses came in the middle, and while there were some unique ones like the 32mm f1.4, the 22mm f2, and the super unique 28 f3.5 macro that also came with lights on the front, that was a really unique lens. For photography, this camera was great and served a lot of entry-level photographers quite well, and I don't want to discount it for video either. Later down the line, the EOS M cameras got some pretty unique performance bumps with modifications like Magic Lantern software tuning. I saw a lot of posts about these cameras being mini cine cameras, and the video coming out of them looked great. But with Canon's launch of the RF mount being the dominant mount in the Canon lineup, the writing was really on the wall for the EOS M line, effectively starting the clock for the discontinuation of the series. There's not a lot of examples of modern camera brands being willing to maintain two separate but concurrent mounting technologies, so really Canon had to choose in some regards. Now, initially when Canon released the first RF mount lenses in 2018, the EOS M series of cameras enjoyed some relative safety because they already had a couple lenses out, and all of the EOS M cameras were APS-C sensors, while all of the original RF Canon cameras were full frame, so there was a bit of a gap between who would be buying the EOS M and who would be buying the RF. But then Canon announced the R10 and the R7, which were RF APS-C cameras, and that they would also be getting RF APS-C lenses, and at that point the two systems were directly competing with each other. And while there were fans of the EOS M cameras and the EF M lenses, they weren't enough to really stop the push of the RF lens. Like, the RF was replacing the EF long-standing popular favorites among Canon shooters, and that left the EOS M cameras in limbo, especially because they weren't getting the same amount of attention as Canon's RF line. The recent announcement earlier this year of the new R100 camera from Canon was also a nail in the coffin for the EOS M, a very specific nail in the coffin, because Canon in their announcement materials was on the record in saying, quote, "The Canon EOS R100 camera was designed for new first-time mirrorless camera or existing interchangeable camera users who previously enjoyed EOS Rebel or EOS M cameras." Oof for EOS M owners. There were a couple other reasons why the EOS M cameras weren't seeing the success that the booming RF was coming out of its development, and that was that the EOS M line didn't really have a logical upgrade path. The cameras got really good, but there was never a professional transition into a larger sensor offering. Additionally, there weren't actually a lot of lenses in the EOS M system. It was a very lean offering, which likely hampered the camera's long-term success. Now, the EOS M line did stand for 11 years, and it was successful. It was highly popular, and personally, I recommended those cameras a lot to people looking to get into Canon photography. And we have to give Canon credit because this camera line preceded Sony's original offering of the Alpha camera. In the world of pioneering mirrorless cameras, Canon released this at a time where mirrorless was like a quirky technology, and DSLR was the mainstay. Another pretty obvious indicator of the EOS M being on its way out is that Canon hadn't released a new EOS M camera since late 2020. That's a big gap for the system. So alongside Canon's RF mount lenses, they've also been developing RF-S lenses for APS-C cameras. Personally, it's always sad to see a camera system discontinued, especially for people who have built their hobbies or careers inside that system. There was certainly a niche and an appeal for small form factor mirrorless cameras, even going back to 2012. It's a high popularity form factor that works well in the entry level and in the middle end. It works great for vlogging and content creation, and you can see spiritual successors in the market like Sony's ZV-1, which have taken that compact form factor and juiced it up to be higher performance than maybe you could even get with the EOS M line. While this marks the end of the EOS M system, I don't think it nearly marks the end of EOS M and EF M shooters. I think people with these cameras will continue to shoot with them for a long time coming, and obviously Canon will continue to support them in parts and service. Now, Canon has not specifically stated that the EOS M will not be seeing any more stock or production of its products, but in my opinion, product availability will become harder and harder to come by until the camera system is eventually completely phased out. If you're an owner of one of these cameras, you will have to identify a new upgrade path for when you eventually need to swap systems. However, if you're making content on these cameras that you enjoy, all the power to you, because they are, at the end of the day, excellent cameras. But what do you think about the discontinuation of the EF M system? This is an old one, and you know, I haven't used one of these cameras in a long time. I kind of just remember them being around. You know, every time I would walk into a local photo store or even like a general technology store like a Best Buy, you would see these cameras marketed in the entry level, and they were quite compelling. I think a lot of people picked them up thinking that they would be an entry level or a gateway into a larger system, and it's sad to see Canon not delivering on those promises. But this is an older system. It's older than the Alpha line on Sony's end, and it's one of the oldest interchangeable mirrorless systems still out there. I think for what it's worth, the invention of this system and deployment into the public helped to bring mirrorless systems into maturity, and they help to market them amongst people. I think people are more genuinely acceptable of mirrorless. I think mirrorless progressed faster than it would have if it didn't get mass adoption by a massive camera company like this so early on. So the EOS M system did a lot of work in the photography and video creation space that it isn't necessarily getting credit for. I think a lot of mirrorless cameras we have today and the form factors we see today were influenced by Canon's early movements in this space, and for that we should give this lineup credit for. I'm sad to see it go, but I'm hopeful that the RF and RFS line on the Canon side will be picking up the slack. As I've said before, it's never been a better time to be someone looking to purchase a creative tool like a camera. There's so many options, and the quality is so unbelievable compared to where we were a number of years ago. But what do you think of the discontinuation of the EOS M and the EF M lenses? Let me know your comments down below. I read every single one of them. I'll try my best to get back to you. A little bit of a follow-up here. I just want to thank everyone watching this video for 1,000 subscribers, which I hit a couple days ago. I appreciate you all very much. I hope you're having a great day and continue to, and I'll see you in the next video.